Howdy everyone, this is a live stream update regarding the upcoming severe weather threat for Indiana that is going to be coming tomorrow, okay, Western Indiana and much of Illinois. There's been quite a few changes. It's definitely shifted a lot eastward since the previous since the previous SPC updates. It's shifted eastward, and this might be something I might go out and chase because I have received word that the Northern Indiana radar system is down right now, so chasers definitely need to be out on this if there is an event going on here. I'm going to be examining the models and keeping kind of a check on where I should position myself. I am very likely going to be staying positioned around the Northern Indiana region tomorrow, but this is the slight risk area that is currently out. The models don't really do a good job of showing this potential that exists out here, but it is a 5% tornado risk across Illinois and then a 2% tornado risk across western Indiana, and then we also have some damaging wind and hail potential that exists across western Indiana as well. All severe hazards possible with these storms. We've got a decent setup across this generally concentrated area, so there will be some storms likely firing around this area in the afternoon, evening, and likely into the overnight hours. They will begin to weaken as they approach the overnight hours, but they will still be present and will continue off into the Ohio Valley region before beginning to weaken and dissipate. So I want to do a little update on this event and then the event that I talked about on my previous video on Wednesday. It has definitely downtrended since latest runs, which is good. So we will look at those models as well, but definitely an all severe hazards potential existing for this event, and it has shifted eastward. It was centered over Iowa, Missouri, and Illinois, and has shifted eastward into Indiana now at the current moment, and parts of southwestern Michigan. So we're gonna look at the models, get an idea of what the models are saying, and if they agree on what could potentially be seen from this event. And if you are enjoying these live updates, make sure to give us a subscribe if you are watching either on Twitch, Facebook, or YouTube. We are on all three of those platforms right now doing this live stream. Okay, so let's get started with this. We're going to look at the GFS model to begin with, kind of get a more broader idea of what could be happening with this setup. So let's progress the model. We got some severe thunderstorms moving through the west at the current moment, much farther west. All that rainfall associated with that will dissipate pretty quickly, and then the models are showing, which actually I want to go to a later update of the models here, the latest update, because that was not the latest update of the model. So the models do show some thunderstorm development as late Sunday night, it appears, across parts of the Great Lakes region. That's what's being shown by the GFS model. It doesn't really show that development in the afternoon hours. If we get a sounding in Illinois and Indiana, sounding shows a little bit of Cape, but not really too much conducive for a severe weather event. Go to southern Michigan here, and it does show a little marginal severe potential tomorrow with some of the storms that could pop up in southern Lower Michigan. There is a marginal risk in extreme southwestern Lower Michigan per the SPC. So there might be some thunderstorms anywhere in this general area on Sunday that could be capable of producing an all severe hazards type scenario. Forecast sounding does show a little bit of curvature in the photographs, but it doesn't really show a textbook type curvature for supercell development. So not really, the GFS doesn't really show this super well, this particular event. But let's pause it at the point where we would be focusing on. I actually got a little bit ahead of myself on Wednesday. We want to backtrack a little bit. I don't know what happened there, but it scrolled a little bit farther. So that sounding actually was not the sounding I was meaning to look at. So this is the sounding I want to look at, and it does actually show some activity beginning to develop ahead of this event for Sunday. If I get a sounding now, still again not looking super good, but if we look at a sounding from later on, you do get a little bit more curvature in the photograph later on in the evening. So this shows Sunday at 7 p.m. you get a little bit of curvature, and you can kind of see a little bit of precipitation beginning to develop. Doesn't really show the intensity of those cells that could potentially be popping up later on. So, but GFS, let's go to a more high definition model in just a minute. But first, I want to get a look at some of the different severe weather dynamics that they are showing with this particular setup. Cape values, again, it looks like Cape is going to be displaced farther off to the northern portion of this, and it does look like it's going to be more of a late night type or a later in the evening type event, probably until once it gets dark. So SRH values, you can see they're rather elevated across parts of Indiana. So that's the measure of how much spin we could possibly see in the atmosphere, how the wind is interacting with each other to create updrafts and spin, and that vertical lift. You've got some decent levels that could be conducive for some supercell development across this region. So that's something to pay attention to. Supercell composite values, a little bit lower. They actually do appear to be more focused off towards Iowa in some points, but again, it looks like the storms are really going to be starting to pop up in this general area, which there's a few values showing up on the supercell composite. But GFS doesn't really do a great job of showing this event, but it does show the wind fields and how that wind is going to really play a role in the development of these storms, because at the surface you've got southerly winds, and then mid layer is southwesterly winds, and then the upper layer is northwesterly winds. So that is why you've got a good deal of spin in the atmosphere, all those different wind values, that wind shear that's occurring in the atmosphere, that's really going to help to drive a few of these storms to develop in the Indiana region. And we've got some shear also, again, once out of the northwest, and you've got those lower level winds that are changing in multiple different areas. You can get a forecast sounding, and you can kind of see right here as you go up in the higher levels of the atmosphere, you can see the change or the progression of the wind, how it's going to come out of the south of the surface and then start to shift to the west. That is what's going to create that low-level wind shear that is conducive for thunderstorm development and potentially looking for those brief potential spin-up tornadoes. Now, GFS does not show much CAPE with this setup, which CAPE is something that we will definitely need. So we'll need ample temperature, we'll need ample heat and moisture for this event to really unfold. But good things to look at with this potential setup here. I want to look at the winds at the surface. You got some 30-knot winds out of the south showing on this particular graphic. We go up to the mid layer. Again, it's showing a change, but it is definitely out of the southwest, out of a different direction. And then as we go higher in the atmosphere, you can see it starts to shift to the west and northwest. And that is going to drive some of these storms to really pop up and strengthen. And then we go up really high in the atmosphere, and you've still got those northwesterly winds. So those variables are really going to play a role in the thunderstorm development we have later on tomorrow. Now, areas where I will potentially be chasing is likely going to be focused around this general area here. I'm not going to go really farther west than Elkhart or South Bend, and I won't go farther east than Fort Wayne most likely. I'm probably just going to stay in this general area, try to keep a focus on the area where the radar is down in Indiana, where those severe thunderstorms could potentially develop, because this could be a rather decent event, and it's really where we need chasers on the ground right now without radar functioning in northern Indiana region. So that's likely going to be my setup. Let's look at a higher definition model now real quick. So let's go through with this one. This is the latest run. So this doesn't go as far enough as we would like to. So let's back it up. HRRR doesn't really do a good job of projecting what could happen with this event either. It actually doesn't show really that much development unless you are in western Illinois. If you get a sounding ahead of these storms that are developing in the high definition model, there's that curvature on the hodograph that you would expect with this type of setup. Marginal tornado event, good low level shear, and you can really see that change of winds on this vertical graphic here. Cloud bases are quite low, definitely enough here to fuel a tornado potential in parts of Illinois. And those storms will continue to progress southeast before beginning to die out as the sun goes down. Things will begin to cool down. You've still got that change in winds at the surface as you get into western Indiana, but it really doesn't show those storms developing in northwestern Indiana, but the environment still does appear for marginal severe potential, but the wind shear on the HRRR model in northern Indiana appears less, and there's not really as much of a change in winds as you go up farther north into northern Indiana. So it may not be the most significant event in northern Indiana. In fact, you may see some additional showers and thunderstorm clusters develop later on. And again, not really showing too much potential for severe levels in this northern Indiana region where the slight risk area is really focused at the current moment. So let's get a little bit of an analysis of the environment at about, we'll go with 3 p.m. We'll go with 3 p.m. real quick. In severe weather, let's take a look at the, well, actually I need to freeze frame it first at hour 21. That's 3 p.m. on Sunday, okay? So let's look at the cloud cover. Cloud cover is something I want to look at. There will be some cloud cover over southern Indiana. That cloud cover really could have a role in inhibiting a lot of thunderstorm development, but you got some sunshine breaking through in northern Indiana, which could give some more instability to that general region. So northern Indiana is not out of the woods because the radar's not showing it, but it does appear there is going to be some sunshine filtering through that general area. Let's look at more severe weather dynamics with the HRRR surface-based cape. Rather displaced and low, it appears, across northern Indiana based on the HRRR model. It looks like it's going to be more focused across parts of Illinois where there's a bit more moisture in that region, so it doesn't really appear that Indiana's going to have as good of potential with that lower instability. Energy helicity, actually let's look at SRH first. SRH, there is still helicity as shown, especially in southwestern Michigan and southern Indiana. These storms will have some spin in them if they develop, because models do show that environment of different changes in wind at different levels of the atmosphere for this type of event. Supercell composite values low to practically nothing according to what is the setup at 3 p.m. Let's advance it to about 5 p.m. Increases just a little bit across the general area, but it really doesn't look super well defined that we could see supercells in this general region, and by the time we reach this general area, there's not really too much development going on out here. So let's look again at the updraft helicity, more focused across areas that are in the slight risk: Illinois, Iowa, northeastern Missouri. Not really looking like a really conducive setup in Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio based on what the models are showing. Let's back it up again to 3 p.m. on Sunday. And let's get a sounding in the general area. See, there is not much of a change in wind at the surface, and cloud bases are a little more elevated across parts of northern Indiana. It really looks more like it's going to be more of a southern mode, given that forecast sounding. Looks like it's going to be a little bit farther south than what that initial slight risk is showing. But models can change, and they likely very much will change. So it's going to be something we just want to watch as we continue looking at the models. If we get in a look at the different winds and different layers of the atmosphere, you got the southwesterlies again in parts of the mid layer, and then as you get towards the upper levels of the atmosphere, again it shows that change in wind in different levels of the atmosphere, and you got that wind out of the north, kind of shifting out of the northwest. But HRRR does project it may look like more of a westerly setup in the upper levels, so that might have an influence on the intensity of the storms as well. So looking at all these variables, there's a lot of things to just be on guard for this upcoming event. There is going to be some convective inhibition scattered about the area too, but it looks relatively low, meaning these storms will be able to break through and pop up Photographs not really looking super great unless you're in parts of southern Illinois. That's a good photograph shown there. And then there's a bunch, it's a little rigid across this general area of Indiana. So let's compare that to the NAM 3K. We'll give this we'll have this be our last model that we look at this evening. And we'll get it to the point where we see those storms begin to develop. We want to fast forward to the latest update. You got those severe thunderstorms that are currently ongoing in parts of western areas, and now we see. All right, so this model is actually doing a good job of showing some of these thunderstorms developing on the NAM 3K. So let's look at this model. It does look like it's going to organize a little bit into a line of thunderstorms, but then quickly weaken as we get after dark. So this actually does show that it is going to be forming mostly after dark as well. But the NAM 3K does show those severe levels that could exist with K values around 1,000. You've got a lot of low relative helicity in the atmosphere. It is quite elevated, capable of producing those severe storms. You get down towards Illinois where those storms pop up. You got a really big rigid curve with a quick dive. You got some good low level shear there shown. And it does look like these storms may develop later than the general afternoon hours. So that may be a positive thing, as they will not really have the sun to energize them and continue and give them more intensity in the atmosphere. So this might be good news, but still showing that marginal tornado potential. But if storms will pop up in this general area, I will be on them. I will most definitely be on them, because that is an area that I can very much cover quite quickly, quite easily. I got kind of a busy schedule tomorrow, but I will try to cover that general area if I can get to it. I wish I could see the current forecast for Wednesday, because Wednesday I'm still monitoring that potential for severe weather, as the SPC is as well, which we will take a look at that maybe in a later video, because it is late and it is time for everyone to hit the hay. So thanks for watching if you are watching, and hopefully you have enjoyed. Make sure to subscribe if you found this video informational and helpful, and I will continue to provide updates on these next few events as they unfold. Check out the YouTube, because I will be storm chasing on there if the storms tend to initiate around the general area of southwestern Michigan. So I will see you all later on, and stay safe out there.